Good evening once again. I'm Tamara Wittes, Director of the Center for Middle East Policy at Brookings. And I'd like to personally welcome all of you and thank those of you who traveled so far to be part of our dialogue. As Strobe noted earlier, the Middle East is often a trouble spot, and since 2002, our center has worked to help chart the path to a Middle East at peace with itself and with the world. We boast a dozen resident scholars and an incredible group of non-resident fellows who hail from all across the Middle East, as well as working here in our headquarters in Washington. And along with special events like this Saban Forum, our scholars' field research in places like Iraq and Yemen, their powerful writing, their testimony before Congress, their briefings to senior officials, those are at the heart of our work. I'd like to ask all of our Brookings scholars around the room tonight to just stand for a moment so that we can recognize you. Thank you. Thank you so much. And now, ladies and gentlemen, we are in for a treat for the second part of our program. As Mr. Saban noted, sadly, Foreign Minister Lieberman was not able to join us because of the loss of his mother. But I think the program we have this evening is more than a replacement. It is spotlight, newsworthy in its own right. A conversation between our good friend Isaac Bougie Herzog and Jeffrey Goldberg. Now, Bougie, as you all know him, is the chairman of Israel's Labor Party, the leader of the parliamentary opposition. He's been a member of Knesset for more than a decade, and last year won a resounding victory in the Labor Party primaries to become the party leader, and he's been a regular participant in our Saban Forum for many years. But as Israelis begin a new political season, with elections scheduled now for March 17th, I could not imagine a more timely opportunity to hear from Israel's opposition leader about his goals and his vision for his party and his country. And as before, to engage Chaver Knesset Herzog in dialogue, I am very pleased to welcome another regular forum participant, another friend of Brookings, Jeffrey Goldberg. Jeffrey is a columnist for The Atlantic and Bloomberg View, writing primarily about the Middle East. He used to be an advice columnist too, but Jeffrey, I know that didn't last very long. He is the author of a wonderful book entitled Prisoners, a Muslim and a Jew Across the Middle East Divide. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the Saban Forum Isaac Herzog and Jeffrey Goldberg.
I just asked him what side he wants to be on, and he said the right. Note that. Thank you very much, Tammy. Thank you, Chaim, Martin. Everyone who's here, and thank you. We've agreed beforehand to call ourselves Jeff and Bougie, so okay, we're gonna. No problem. There's a lot to cover tonight. I want to start, though, with something that I call word association.
Before you do that, can I say 3 short sentences? One is that I, of course, join with all my colleagues from Israel in expressing heartfelt condolences to Minister Lieberman. Secondly, on a different note, to be grateful and thankful to Chaim and Cheryl Saban and Brookings and the Saban Forum. And lastly, I beg your pardon on behalf of all the Israelis who've flown here throughout the night and the morning. If their head falls apart, please understand.
Are you suffering from jet lag right now?
Who doesn't?
Well, that's good. That's good from my end.
Don't worry. I know you're a shrewd journalist, and I'm ready.
Shrewd is a code word. Shrewd is a code word for something.
I read you constantly, so I know.
Let's actually start with the news of the moment. You took a long and possibly eventful flight here with, among others, Tzipi Livni, and there's a lot of interest right now in understanding whether you and Tzipi Livni and possibly others are going to try to merge your parties, merge your lists in order to form a potent center-left bloc. Can you talk about this?
First of all, I said in the media that I told my wife I'm going to invest in some couplehood with Tzipi over the weekend. But seriously speaking, let's understand let's understand Israeli political scene for a moment. There is, and I'm here to present also to each and every one of you and break this notion that Netanyahu or the Likud is unbeatable. I'm here to tell you that I will form the next government and I will lead Israel to a different direction. And it's feasible if we build the proper coalitions in Israeli politics.
Okay, so Mr. Prime Minister, how are you going to build that coalition?
I think you have to understand that it requires a lot of things. Number one, that our egos are set aside. I lead Labor. Labor is the party that founded the State of Israel. It's deeply rooted in Israeli society. We believe, and I believe, that from day one, since I took office, that we should have a front running together of forces. Clearly, Tzipi Livni is a very distinguished Israeli leader, and I would like very much to be able to join forces with her and her party, with other parties in the center. There has to be a centrist Israeli bloc that presents a clear alternative, unequivocal alternative to Benjamin Netanyahu.
Now could you answer the question? Have you formed the list?
Not yet. Not yet. We are, look, as you know all too well, these are processes. The elections were decided just in the last few days. The Knesset hasn't even finalized its dissolvement yet. We've seen in Israeli politics that you believe it only when you see it. Therefore, we are all in a process. I hope it will succeed. I believe clearly that Labor is the strongest element in this format. It should lead it. And I hope we'll be able to do it.
Let me ask you a couple of questions about who you might serve in government with. Can you envision going into a government with Avigdor Lieberman's party?
Let me explain. The game is a coalition's game. It's not a presidential race. Whilst my recent polls, or the national recent polls of the weekend, gave me quite a nice leap ahead in terms of closing the gap with Bibi, at the end, it's a coalition's game. A coalition's game means that you have to see what will be the day after. And this is what people don't get. There could be an interesting coalition of parties and leaders who will decide to form a coalition, a new coalition, and I hope that my capability of tying knots, of being able to bring people together, things which I've done also in winning Labour Party primaries, as well as understanding the political vista, and I say it outright, for me, all partners are possible. From Meretz to Lieberman's party. The Arabs themselves always say they don't want to go into any coalition, but like in Rabin's coalition, they may be supportive from the outside. Let me add and explain to the crowd who don't understand Israeli politics something about what it means to be leader of the opposition. It ain't nothing like being minority leader here, because we have in my opposition right now 8 parties, okay? It's a multi-party system. It's not Republicans and Democrats. In a multi-party system, today I have in my opposition 3 Arab parties. I have a Muslim Brotherhood party in my opposition. We have the only legal Muslim Brotherhood party in the world or in the region. So, and we have ultra-Orthodox parties. So we have to understand that all communities in Israel are represented. And I believe, since I'm talking to all of them, and since I respect the unique structure of Israeli society, that we can work together and build a coalition which will be different from the current right-wing coalition.
Let's talk about you and your candidacy, since you've announced it so forthrightly. You're obviously a man of accomplishment. You come from a very, very famous family in Israel, but you're known in Israel as, let's say, a non-charismatic figure.
Thank you.
You're welcome. No. There's a certain assumption made about.
You know how many charismatic leaders we had and what happened to them?
There's a certain.
Just think about it.
There's a certain understanding in Israeli politics, and maybe this is just conventional wisdom, received wisdom, that the voters want somebody, especially from the center or center-left, who is either a general or is burly or gruff, and no one would mistake you for Gabi Ashkenazi walking down the street.
Gabi's here.
I know he's here. That's why I invoked his name. So talk about the barriers to your success among the voters. I mean, and then we'll talk about the Labor Party's barriers.
It's combined, it's intertwined, where the staging of labor is an issue in and of itself. Labor is staged right now in the center left. It should resume its role as a mother party of a major bloc, together with all the other parties which I mentioned, because labor has the capability of being so. Labor is looking and talking to all the other members of the political scene in the same eye level, and of course me. Now, as for myself, since I don't intend to have kind of a psychological treatment with you, the real story is the following. There is an innate fear that runs within Israeli society of whatever we see and hear around us. And it's, it's a natural reaction of human beings. And my duty and role is to acquire enough trust in all of the data and the polls. People trust me. This is one of my virtues. They have to be able to trust in me. And this is what I'm focusing on. That's my main challenge.
Answer this question, because security is the threshold for obviously a center or center-left candidate. Who are your security gurus? Who do you look to? Because you're not yourself a general. Who do you look to on the Israeli spectrum for advice on matters of national security?
There are wonderful people within the security and defense community who are willing to lend a hand, who are willing to give from their experience. We have some people within our party. We have people from the outside. There are very distinguished people, some of them even here. The issue is, though, that we have, again, to shatter this premonition. We had a party, one of our lists that ran in the elections, either 2009 or before, that had half of its list only generals, and it didn't make a difference. If you ask me, the real issue is social economic. Whilst we believe, of course, undoubtedly, and we'll talk about it, in breaking the umbilical cord and moving forward with the Palestinians and creating very strong security interests of Israel being fully fostered and nurtured, we give an answer on economic issues and social issues. We must remember the social protests of 2011. Summer of 2011 was a major watershed in Israeli history. It is something that I'm always inquisitive about in American politics and history. All of a sudden, the nation woke up and demanded not security or peace, they demanded social justice. And they kept on saying social justice. And 5% of the nation's population gathered in a city square one night demanding social justice with no violence. 100 years after the revolution in Russia, all of a sudden, social justice, but in a democratic sense. And they didn't get that delivered to them. And the only party that can deliver it to them in a fair and square manner that will be fair for all is Labor. And this is part of the real agenda battle between me and Netanyahu. Because Netanyahu speaks constantly about 2 or 3 issues. All of them are important, but these are not the only issues.
I want to come to this in a minute, but I do want an answer on this question of who you listen to in Israel, in security
Well, I won't
circles.
tell you.
Why won't you tell us?
Because some of the people don't want to be exposed. It's legitimate. We are all in the process. Believe me, I have a very strong security cadre. I and I hinted and I said we are talking to many people, and definitely I hope to be able to present a nice group of people who devoted their life to the defense of the state of Israel, who are going to be with me and with my party or with our bloc.
I'll probably try one more time later when you're
you
really
listen.
tired. But
I'm not going to chicken out.
Let's talk. That's not the exact expression, but you're close. You could really thrill the people watching on C-SPAN if you try.
Let's put that aside.
Yeah,
the real expression is something which I don't like at all, of course.
We're going to come to that nevertheless. But come to this large question of the Labor Party. Why is the Labor Party in such a diminished state? Where did it go wrong?
It's not necessarily in a diminished state.
Well, certainly compared to the founding of the state.
I'll explain. Because right now the Israeli political map is comprised of medium-sized parties. The last one who had more than 40 mandates was Ariel Sharon. And the structure has been actually broken to medium, small-sized parties. And remember that there's going to be a new threshold introduced in this election, which is quite big. It's 4 mandates. Namely, parties will have to get to the Knesset only if they get 4 mandates. That's quite a lot. That's about 3.25%. Therefore, there will have to be mergers, M&As. There will have to be mergers. Now, as for your question about labor, a few processes, undercurrents. The first one was that we lost touch with some of what the public really feels is important to them. For a long time, we were members in coalitions of other leaders. We kind of were erased of our identity, took us time to recover. And we also lost touch with new groups in society who are taking their role and demanding to be part of it. For example, the Russian immigration of 1 million people. We kind of lost them somewhere. They supported both Rabin and Barak, and they were turned off. Add to it other groups, the Arab population. They gave 96 or 98% support to Ehud Barak. Couple it with the fact that there's a young generation who took over, who's coming in, who's voting, and they don't remember the legacy of labor. And add to that the fact that even within that young generation or the general public at large, we were viewed as giving up too quickly to the Palestinians or the Arabs.
On that subject, it's April of next year, and you're the prime minister. You're a big advocate, obviously, of the two-state solution. I want to know specifically from you why you think that you will achieve what Ehud Barak failed to achieve and what Ehud Olmert failed to achieve. They tried to make peace, the first with Yasser Arafat, the second with Abu Mazen. It didn't work. What are you going to do different that's going to get to a two-state solution?
I'm not going into any illusions, but I'm not willing to give up to try again. And moreover, I believe that part of it has to do with psychology. We are not dealing with psychology at all. The fact that there is no connection, no discussion, no discourse or no trust between the leaders is adverse to the ability to reach an agreement. Yesterday morning, I had breakfast with Jerry Adams, the leader of the IRA, Sinn Féin. May I remind you, he was an outcast. He came to Israel and Palestine. I know him, and we had breakfast. And I said to him, Jerry, could you tell me what was the moment of truth that all of a sudden you guys moved? And he said, when we all came to realize that we won't achieve it in any other way. Both sides. And also there was a unique configuration of leaders. Amongst them, or predominantly one of them is Bill Clinton, who knew how to work on the psychology of the leaders and the peoples. This is part of it, and nobody is dealing with it. I speak a lot to Abu Mazen, and I said to Abu Mazen, you know, I said to him, people say that even if I negotiate with you, you'll never make peace with us. And he laughed. And he said, I'm sure we can reach an agreement. It depends on building trust. It depends on confidence-building measures. It depends on being innovative, bold, and it depends on radiating to the people that there is hope. The situation that we see right now is so devastating because there's a feeling of lack of hope. There's a despair feeling, and most worrisome of all is the unleashing of feelings of religious hatred that is so dangerous to all of us, turning it into interreligious war.
You're Prime Minister. What is your settlement policy?
My settlement policy, first and foremost, is based on the famous parameters. I believe in the blocks. I definitely believe in Gush Etzion being part of Israel. It's essential for its security.
When the U.S. administration tells you to stop building in Gush Etzion, no, I want to get this in. When the U.S. administration tells you no building in Gush Etzion, and you're Prime Minister, what do you say?
It will be a mistake that you go in with me into all these. I learned from Hillary Clinton. She said, I don't answer theoretical questions. Because I believe that Israel, as always, I always said it, Israel should put a plan on the table. Israel should move forward and offer. And within that umbrella of movement, there are things that both sides can do. I believe in freezing settlement construction outside the blocks as part of confidence-building measures. But it should be part of a plan that Israel presents. And this plan should, of course, take into account, most importantly, the basic inherent security needs of the State of Israel.
What if it doesn't work? Do you have a plan B? I mean, you've spoken very feelingly about the unsustainability of the status quo.
That's true.
But what is the plan B?
The problem is that when we speak of plan Bs, we already negate the possibility of moving on with plan A. I know there are many experts in this room who are top experts who don't believe in the negotiating process and rather believe in unilateral steps. I think Israel, the nation, suffered a certain trauma from a unilateral step of pulling out of Gaza. We have to attend to that fear. We were there. I was there. We were blamed for pulling out by our brothers and sisters from the settlements in Gaza. And we said to them, there will be the new Hong Kong of the Middle East. And it didn't work out. So we have to take it into account. I do believe, however, unequivocally and from the bottom of my heart, that since it's a must under all circumstances to separate from the Palestinians, that if it fails, we will have to take steps that define our borders in a clearer way.
That's unilateral withdrawal.
Depends in which way you do the unilateralism side. There are ways. Even if you don't negotiate, you can coordinate. Even if you can even freeze settlement construction, as I mentioned. You can do steps that say, I give priority to that area and not the other. But I think it's a mistake that we already assume that it's over. It's part of the tragedy that unfolds in front of our eyes. Well, it is not true. I'm telling you, absolutely. It is possible, absolutely possible still, to make peace with the Palestinians.
I'm just trying to put myself in the shoes of an Israeli voter who hears you say that if all else fails, we're going to have to unilaterally withdraw from large parts.
I did not say that.
Well, what are you saying?
I said we will have to work smartly in making efforts, whether legislative or others, in arranging the fact that most Israelis will be in certain areas, but I'm not willing to go into any detail.
Let's turn then, and I'll try in a minute, but let's turn then to foreign affairs, and specifically an issue that came up on this stage an hour ago, relations between the United States and Israel. Secretary Clinton made it seem as if there are occasional ripples in the calm surface of these waters, downplayed personal tension between the president and your prime minister. You have spoken about this, however, as a crisis. Can you define why you think this is more of a crisis than Hillary Clinton says it is?
First, let me say that I'm not here to start personally criticizing the prime minister outside Israel. My aim is to convince the people of Israel. That's one thing. There are rules of the game that we attend to. However, I think that the policies of the Israeli government has led us to a situation of total lack of trust. total lack of trust between the administrations or the leaders. Now, it's essential to have trust between the leaders, not only the professionals, not only the government level, but the leaders. It's a fact. It's a fact that there is no trust at all between the president and the prime minister, and we will have to attend to it. And one of my first aims will be to mend those relationships. In Israel's history throughout, the ability to have direct contact, trust, and conversations between the top leaders was essential in critical moments to Israel's well-being as well as to regional peace and safety.
Do you blame the American side or the Israeli side
I'm
more for this?
not in a blame game. Listen, I'm telling the Israeli people that there are so many faulty policies that we will have to correct. And there are so many mistakes that Netanyahu has done that we will correct. Part of it, a major part of it, is the relationship with the United States. We are here in a forum that always deals with the relationship between Israel and the United States. Even if we argue, we should do it in closed rooms. We knew how to argue, even if we debate. But there's the issue of trust, of sharing common interests, of telling each side what's the problem and what's my interest, what's your interest. Let's try to get together and agree. Because the United States is really still the major superpower of the world. Because the United States is not pulling out of the Middle East as people were perceiving it to be. It's wrong, it's not true. And because the United States is our closest ally. And it's so clear.
Well, I've heard people on the right in Israel talk about replacing Europe, for instance, with a China-India policy. You don't think that Israel can pivot east?
There's nothing to compare. With all due respect to these important countries, economically they are very important countries. But we look at the record. Look at the record in the United Nations. Look at the record in the UN Security Council. We have only real one trustworthy ally, which we really share affection and trust with on so many levels, and there's nothing to replace that.
Let me ask you a very...
It also has a huge economic bearing, also on the Israeli economy.
I have to just step back and ask a very basic question at this moment. It's something I actually don't understand. Why is Israel moving toward elections right now? Can anyone actually explain what happened?
The situation is like some sort of a theater act whereby each side locked the other side to a situation where they couldn't move on together. And I think that part of it has to do with the ill decisions of Benjamin Netanyahu, who decided that he can pull this one again. And if you ask me, the Israeli public will be faced with the question, is it willing to have another term of Benjamin Netanyahu? It will be the key question in this election, in addition to all the important issues which you've discussed. But it will also be a question that will reflect the following. Will Israel skid dangerously into becoming a more extreme state in its behavioral mode, definitely as a government, or will Israel correct itself into the direction of well-positioned policies that go together with the original envisionment of Zionism, understanding our regional situation, trying to move towards peace, social justice, alignment with the United States, economic recovery, and most importantly, strengthening and fostering our democratic values.
I want to come to that in a second, but one more foreign policy, national security question. Where do you rank the Iran threat in the scheme of threats, in the range of threats? Obviously, the current prime minister believes that Iran poses a unique existential threat, the Iranian nuclear program in particular, to Israel. Do you believe that that is the paramount threat facing Israel today?
I believe it's a very, very important threat. It is definitely an important threat. And it is an important threat that has to be dealt with. And may I say the following. I think that the negotiation process is important. I think the United States and its allies should get the best deal possible. I think we should enable it to get the best deal possible, but we should not rule any alternative off the table until we see that deal.
Do you trust the Obama administration to get a good deal?
I trust the Obama administration to get a good deal. We hope they'll get the best deal possible. That means a lot of elements. Most importantly, the fact that we have to agree on a set breakout time that will give ample warning to everybody if the Iranians want to break the agreement and move towards the bomb. I think the professionals have to work on it, and we have to give it a chance. Nonetheless, we shouldn't be naive. We still live in a very dangerous and complicated world and region. The policies of the Iranian regime are clear to us. We've been discussing them here for years. And we shouldn't be naive to believe that if there's a deal, all is well. There should be very strict supervision, very strict monitoring and deciphering of whatever is going on in relation to that program.
If you had been prime minister this past summer, how would you have handled the Hamas threat?
First and foremost, I think we should have a combination, both of force and diplomacy. Part of the problem is that we entered that crisis with less international credit in our hands. And that led to a situation whereby within the second week, the international community started already showing nerves and short-sightedness in terms of what's going on in Gaza, because the pictures that came out of Gaza, of course, had a bearing and an influence. One has to see how we deteriorated into that conflict and how to make sure that we don't deteriorate again. Part of it has to do with building a very strong regional coalition that brings in the Palestinian Authority into Gaza, that gives hope to the people of Gaza, that opens up Gaza under strict supervisions and moves on as a basis for a process with the Palestinians. This so far has been missed.
The Palestinian Authority is a fairly weak and corrupt body. Obviously, Palestine itself is divided between two competing and sometimes warring parties. Why do you seem to have more faith in the Palestinian Authority than the average Israeli?
Because they lead a moderate Palestinian political body. Let's be frank about it. We always love to judge everybody else's political systems. I'm not judgmental. If I have to take a decision between Hamas and the Palestinian Authority, I believe in working with the Palestinian Authority. And I believe it's feasible. And they are working. Look at the summer. Let's put it in perspective. Following the abduction of the 3 boys, which was a huge tragedy for Israelis and for everybody, the Palestinian Authority functioned properly. They coordinated with us efforts to find their whereabouts. They handled the situation in calming it down, despite the fact that there were many Israeli operations on the ground. Then came Protective Edge in the summer in Gaza. So before, kind of always, everybody loves to term them as weak. So far, Abu Mazen survived 4 or 5 Israeli prime ministers, to the best of my recollection.
Are you worried about the future of Israeli democracy?
I am worried about the direction which Israeli democracy and society is moving into if we don't correct. Tomorrow you're going to have Naftali Bennett here. That will be a real question. Naftali Bennett, who is a distinguished representative from the right, he believes in annexing Area C. He believes in a deal that the world will accept unilateral steps of Israel in this direction. He doesn't answer the question, what will you do with 100,000 Palestinians who will become Israeli citizens? Take the issue of Jerusalem. The recent terror attacks came from Palestinians from East Jerusalem who grew up under Israeli sovereignty with an Israeli ID card. So does it mean we will include another 100,000 who have no loyalty to the state of Israel in the sense that they won't feel part of Israel but rather under occupation? There is no other choice. Despite all the fears, we will have to get over those fears. We will have to try again. Otherwise, the direction that Israeli society is moving into could be bleak. And that's what we are doing in order to correct it. And I'm worried about undercurrents that are trying to limit and contain and curtail the beautiful vista of Israeli democracy. The fact that in our parliament there is such a wide range of views of free speech laid down by our Supreme Court, to me it's holy. And I'll do whatever I can with my colleagues to protect it. And there are endless efforts. And Tzipi Livni was there as Minister of Justice trying to block every week another piece of legislation, which from the outside, for those with liberal understanding of what democracy is all about, seems incomprehensible and dangerous.
Israel is quite obviously a Jewish state. What's so bad about passing a law that says Israel is a Jewish state?
I will explain the following, and I said it in the floor in the parliament when I debated with Netanyahu last week. I said that when it comes to the deal with the Palestinians, in the final status moments, I think it's correct to say that both states are nation states, that Palestine will be the nation state of the Palestinian people, and Israel the nation state of the Jewish people, as it is derived from the November 47 UN partition plan or resolution. But this has nothing to do with what's within Israel. Within Israel, all citizens must feel they are equal. Not only to say it, but they must feel it. And coming forward with this discourse on Jewish state treads on racist undertones, makes a feeling that somebody will be preferred on the other. The way a majority treats a minority is essential to the well-being of our society. The Arab community in Israel is 20%. It's comprised of all denominations of Christianity and Islam. Fascinating community, like all other communities in Israel, non-homogeneous at all. Many of them want to be part of an inclusiveness in the Israeli public life all throughout, and there are many who want to be secessionists. Our duty is to be inclusive if we want to protect the well-being of the state, and to make anybody feel in any form or manner that he is not that is not only a huge mistake, it's against the basic inherent Declaration of Independence of the State of Israel, which is our Magna Carta.
What I'm hearing from you is that it would be impossible for you to enter a coalition with, say, Avigdor Lieberman, who has just proposed that parts of Israel proper, the triangle area, Wadi Ara, that area, be sliced off in a final peace deal, and the Arabs and their land transferred to Palestinian sovereignty. Those are Israeli citizens.
The problem
it sounds like that's a very, very
Jeff,
basic.
You're so Talmudic tonight.
I'm always Talmudic.
And the reason is...
Especially on Shabbos.
Good. It doesn't work this way. At the end, a coalition in Israel is formed under guidelines of what's agreed and what's the agreed upon policy. And if there will be a possibility of having agreed upon guidelines, that's what will be. But it has nothing to do with the nationality bill per se. The nationality bill per se came out of many ideas that were floating around to define the mere nature of the State of Israel. Now, that nature has been defined in our Declaration of Independence. The greatness of our founding fathers was that they didn't like to talk too much. They did. Simply, they came forward with the Declaration of Independence and then they built a nation. They didn't argue about words endlessly that can hurt. In an atmosphere whereby there is a interreligious flame flaring up and all other issues at stake, it's a horrendous mistake to deal with it and open and unleash all these genies out of the bottle. Don't do it.
Would you say now that the idea of transferring Arab villages that are in Israel, that are made up of Israeli citizens, to Palestinian control is not on the table in your negotiations?
It's not on the table, and it's unconstitutional, not feasible at all. And let's forget it. It's another election spin, okay? Let's put it on record. It won't work. And in general, I invite each and every one of you to tour Israel in depth and understand that what you see from the outside is not exactly what you get. You have all groups have different views of life, and there are many, many Arabs who are included in the big parties, including in my party, and they share a dream with us of living together in peace. And when I go to an emergency room in Hadassah Hospital who saved a soldier's life, and I ask the mother and father who are from Akko, Jewish family from Akko, who saved your son's life? They show me Professor Muhammad Eid, who treated their son and saved his life, and one of the best surgeons in the country. We have to put everything in perspective.
We're going to go to questions in a minute, but I want to ask one other thing. In your opinion, does Israel have PR problems or does Israel have problems?
Israel has both. I don't rule out the fact that we feel besieged and that the world doesn't understand us at times. However, I don't believe in the biblical proverb saying a people that dwells alone. We can't in this era dwell alone. We have to have allegiances. We have to have connections with our friends and allies. We have to cooperate together in the international arena. That's what boosts our economy and our internal strength. And therefore, we can't just go on saying to everybody, crying out loud, we are the ones who are besieged. We have our problems. We need to explain them. Yes, there is a lot of Israel hate around the world, and there is a lot of anti-Semitic undertones. But that has nothing to do with the fact that we have problems we need to deal with. We have to present our policies correctly. We have to change our policies correctly. I always compare Israel to a mid-sized ship in stormy waters, in high seas, that has to maneuver within those seas correctly. Our leaders in the past knew how to do it. And today, we are in a situation where we find ourselves cornered without any ability to maneuver. That's our main problem.
Let me go back to one question, because I want to get you on record as much as possible here. No. This is an important question. I asked Martin this question this summer, which is about the peace process, because we tend to think of the peace process as starting 21 years ago with Oslo, but the Palestinians or their representatives, before there was a nationality and organization, right, have had 4 or 5 opportunities over the last 80 or so years, starting with the Peel Commission, moving through 47, and then that onward, to have a state. Each time the offer has gotten worse, obviously, from a pure territorial standpoint. My question is, and I think this is the question that plagues the left in Israel, is after 80 years of being rejected, of having the division of the land being rejected by the Palestinians or their Arab representatives, I want to come back to this. What makes you think that now, which most people see as a very inauspicious time for a revived peace process, what makes you think that now is the time to try to move toward this two-state solution? It's
not now it's the time. It's been a long, drawn-out process. Don't forget Oslo. You're ignoring a lot of things. You're ignoring the Khartoum process of 68 and compare it to today. It's a totally different ballgame, totally different arena. Today there is an intense interfacing and discourse between us and the Palestinians, not necessarily through the leaders. But my fear is that within the Palestinian and Israeli camp, the peoples are losing faith in the possibility of separating and coming to this two-state solution. It was there, believe me, it was there. In 94, during the Rabin era, there was a huge majority for it in both peoples. Unfortunately, terror on both sides led to the fact that we got into a stumbling block with no possibility of moving forward, and then we've repeated it time and again. It's the easiest thing is to tread on the psychology of fear. Okay? My adversaries in the political system, especially from the right, tread on fear. And I'm trying to challenge that and say we cannot live only on fear. We have to be lucid, we have to be careful, we have to protect our interests, but we must talk. It cannot be that mothers and fathers on the other side don't want peace. It mind boggles me, why would anyone at the age of 35 with 5 children go in the morning and commit suicide and butcher the people he is working with all his life in a synagogue? We have to understand where it comes from. And we have to make an effort and not say, therefore, all the Arab world and the Muslims cannot make peace with us. We have to go on and try. And
where does that come from? Where does that impulse to suddenly slaughter a group
First
of
of all,
rabbis?
there's no justification of it, none whatsoever. It's against any moral, legal, or human values, period. And it's shocking. Nonetheless, when you look at the whole picture, we have to analyze it. And in order to neutralize these elements, we have to bring hope. And we cannot give up on that.
Thank you very much for this
Pleasure.
conversation. We're going to open it up. Call him the gentleman next to Tzipi Livni, Chaim.
Thank you both. Thank you both for a great interview. There are a lot of people here that would like to see a change in government. I'm not going to express my opinion because I'm your host, so I'm going to shut up about that part of it. However, when I look at the members of Knesset and I count the numbers, and I put the right on one side of the aisle and the left on the center of left on the other side, I take out the Arabs, it just can't happen. Would you be willing to give us some numbers about how you think you can become the next prime minister?
Because I say that people don't understand. You all think that the ultra-Orthodox are part of the right and they object to any peace agreement. For example, just like, let's take that as a microcosmos of the analysis. So first, the ultra-Orthodox community has shifted dramatically towards other directions. The 4 widows of the butchered rabbis who were praying and were unfortunately butchered. The 4 widows got up in front of 1,000 people. And the first widow said, we have to think about the way we treated others. Just as an example, okay? Now nobody, it was quoted in Yediot Achronot, nobody picked up on it. Because why get interested in those groups out there who we are striking them out as if they are out of it? Absolutely wrong. Absolutely wrong. Remember, Rabin's coalition had Shas in it. And therefore, that's just one example of why people in all communities are simmering with inner debate about where to go. It's not a question of right and left. It's a question of where we go from here. Can we live together? Can we live in peace? And that's why I believe that in a normal configuration, take, for example, the party of Moshe Kahlon, unknown here, less known here to the American public. It's a major player in the elections. One can assume, at least, that he won't rule out any coalition, definitely a centrist coalition. And we mentioned others. And I think that there will be a moment of truth whereby the Israeli political system will have to decide, do we move to that direction or do we skid into the abyss of a total deadlock and the rest of it is clear to us?
So no numbers.
There's no reason to make numbers right now. Let's, we're in the beginning of the elections. And those politicians here, at least here, or analysts, know that you know how you start elections, you don't know how you end them.
David Makovsky.
Two questions. One is, there's an idea that the founder of the Labor Party, right, David Ben-Gurion, talked about a term which I don't know how you translate it well in English, called mamlachtiyut.
That's true.
Statism.
Certain state civility.
All right.
Yeah.
You're viewed, and I'm not here to dump on your predecessor, but as someone who is more mamlachti than she was.
No, that's unfair.
No. I know. I'm saying there was a perception.
Unfair.
No.
Incorrect.
Okay. I'm not asking you to say
He said he wasn't here to dump on her.
I'm not here asking her to say that it's true.
It's unfair.
No, I'm not asking you to say that. I'm just asking to say, how do you hit that Israeli middle that is wanting that kind of Labor Party, that has that kind of approach?
Part of it is by uniting forces with centrist forces who understand the same thing.
Okay.
We share the same values.
Okay.
Clearly, we share the same values of understanding the risks and danger that are positioned in front of our eyes. Yeah. I have respect, really, for my colleagues, for Yair Lapid, definitely for Tzipi Livni, you can hear her tomorrow, Shalom Mofaz, other parties. We all understand the real inherent dangers that face Israel.
Okay.
And we therefore must share together the ability to bring change.
The other part of it is the issue of, You mentioned the social justice piece of this and how 5% of Israel came together.
It's quite unique compared to America.
And this was a unique moment. But yet Netanyahu won the election after that. He's still ahead of the polls. Maybe you will come up because you will unite.
Look, if you want to depress me, don't talk to me. Let's talk in 3 months' time.
All I'm asking you is, why hasn't Labor been able to really capitalize on what is its natural constituency, which is the social justice movement? And how is it that the right has been more successful?
It's a very good question. There's a guy, a very distinguished person here, Professor Trachtenberg, who led a commission, a national commission following that protest. He can delve into what happened to his recommendations. I think only one out of dozens of recommendations were implemented. But the truth of the matter is that in my mind, it was Yair Lapid who enjoyed the fruit of that process, of that protest. And he didn't deliver.
The last thing, if it's okay, which is just, you didn't join the Netanyahu government during the peace process because of your skepticism. I guess I'm asking you, would you rule out joining, if Netanyahu would win the elections, joining him, or would you rule out bringing him in under your leadership?
The problem is that all of you guys are asking the questions of the last battleground. And I'm telling you that we are focused on winning the elections. And with all due respect, I don't mind inviting Netanyahu to my government if you'll accept the guidelines.
What ministry would he get?
No, I'm trying to explain to you that you have to understand, I'm not hallucinating. It's not easy, it's complicated. But all of us here understand that politics is a game of unclear undercurrents that all of a sudden erupt. There is enormous frustration within the Israeli public in general and body politic in particular as to what is happening in Israel and as to the failed policies of Netanyahu. And this will be reflected in the election results.
Dan Raviv over there. And then we'll come down here.
Mr. Herzog, thank you, Jeff. It's a bit of an uncomfortable subject in this room, but would you agree, as sort of an old hand in Israeli politics, that sometimes at election time, the United States government tries to exert some influence one way or another? And by the way, you might be the beneficiary this time if they did. Do you have any...
Perhaps not true. Perhaps the other way around. Again, whatever you see from here is not what you see from there. Be aware.
All right. Well, what's your view of that at all? Does the U.S. do that? Should they?
First of all, I don't, it's clear to us that nobody should fiddle in the other's political system. At least I intend not to do it in America. And secondly, I think that the United States administration is wise enough to understand what not to do within an election process.
Over here. Is there a mic?
Mick,
Thank you.
I think, yeah.
And then Michael Oren right in the middle.
Thank you. Thank you.
Where he always is.
Bougie, you've spoken about the elections in terms of being crucial for the future of Israel. I'm just wondering, where does the Jewish diaspora fit into your calculus? I mean, I sort of think that the direction and the result of the next election, what happens after that, is crucial for the Jewish world. And in a world where I see the younger generation finding it more and more difficult to connect with the state of Israel, and I would just be interested in your views as to what responsibility you think that Israeli politicians, Israeli
It's a very, very valid point, Mick. The view of the diaspora on Israel and what young people think of Israel is not reflected adequately in the Israeli media at all, or in the Israeli public discourse. We feel, what we see is we see the main Jewish leaders expressing support of Israel. We don't see the grassroots, and we don't see certain streaks of disenchantment, which bother me and my colleagues tremendously. And the belief in Israel as the true homeland of our people. And we have to work towards that. And we have to foster and strengthen and take it into account in what we do as well. Absolutely. For example, I think the whole game of dealing and touching Temple Mount was extremely dangerous and adverse to the basic interests of Israel and the diaspora, because it unleashed a very, very dangerous religious conflict, which is unnecessary at all. Of course, the Palestinians flared it up beautifully. They rode on this without real justification, on this wild horse. And I think that responsible Israeli legislators and ministers cannot do these steps without understanding their implication on synagogues and diaspora Jews all over the world. And it's interesting to note that it were the real sages of the time, the ultra-Orthodox leaders of the time who ruled against going into Temple Mount, including my late grandfather, the first chief rabbi of Israel. And only in recent years, rabbis from religious Zionism decided to undermine those decisions. And I think one needs to debate, argue, and ask deep questions about that to the leaders of religious Zionism.
Can I just add one quick thing to that? Do you think that, I mean, there's a big debate in this country. Do you believe that young American Jews are becoming disenchanted with Israel because of Israeli policies, or they're just growing distant from Israel because they're growing distant from being Jewish?
I'm against generalizing. I think that there are conflicting currents. First of all, Birthright has done wonders. Birthright is a huge success. And all the other projects that follow suit, like Masa, Lapid, and others, they're incredibly important to forming a new feeling towards Israel in the young generation. Now, the young generation lives like the young generation, totally detached at times from knowing the full picture, and sees things on the social networks and others that bother them a lot. And the issues of religious pluralism, or the issues of war and attacks and so forth and so on are sometimes distorted in the discourse. I think that young American Jews are a challenge both for Israel as well as for the organized Jewish community, which is trying its best, actually, in many ways, including the Hillels and the other organizations and the movements, of connecting them better to Israel or bringing them a sense of Jewish continuity.
Michael Oren, and then Nancy Pelosi.
Here. Bush, you have my empathy.
Thank you.
I've been interviewed several times by Jeff Goldberg, and you can see the color of my hair. It's not easy. And I'm going to apologize to you. Apologize because I'm going to ask you the exact same question I asked you last year. Okay? There's a tendency when I listen to you to look at the Palestinians as some type of two-dimensional prop for an Israeli morality play. They don't have agency. They have no control over their own destiny. We are in control. But of course, it's not true. The Palestinians have ultimate agency. They have walked away from negotiations after Israel released prisoners, and a great number of prisoners. They have gone to the UN and are declaring a Palestinian state unilaterally without giving us peace, with the expressed intention of going to the ICC and sanctioning us. You say Abu Mazen has survived 5 Israeli prime ministers because, unlike you, he doesn't stand for election. And in the face of Jordan, in the face of Iraq and Syria unraveling, what chances do you think that a Palestinian state with a corrupt, unelected leadership is going to cohere for a long time? Why would you put your trust in it? So I understand, Bougie, I understand the idea of holding a two-state solution as a vision. But it's a very pretty vision. But a vision is not a policy. And I want to know, in view of Palestinian agency and looking Palestinian agency in the eye, what is your policy? What is your initiative? Where do you go? If he's going to go to the UN and put sanctions on us on the ICC, he won't come back to the negotiation table if you don't freeze perhaps settlements everywhere, including building in Gilo, and you don't release many murderers from Israeli prisons. What's your policy?
I will say the following. The undermining assumption in what you said, which is based on facts. I don't argue with the facts, except that I don't accept the idea that therefore it's over. I don't think it's true. I definitely don't think it's true. I don't think that the fact that there is a Palestinian leadership calls for me to ignore it. All these comments about all these arrangements without the Palestinian leadership or the people, to me, seems futile. However, there is a golden opportunity now which is acceptable by all here. There is a unique convergence of interest that has been there for a long time but emerged throughout the summer with our adjacent neighbors, Egypt and Jordan, both extremely distinguished neighbors, allies in a way, if you want to say so. I know the Egyptian ambassador here. May I say that I think that one needs to understand that President Sisi is a very important player in the region, and I say it here in Washington because it took time that Washington understood the importance and the need to work with Sisi as well, not only with King Abdullah, who was extremely important. So these two neighbors of ours are there. Now you need to add to the equation the Palestinian Authority. And then you have a table with a leg of four. Okay? Egypt, Jordan, Palestinians, and Israel. They can't work together in building a process, getting backing from the Gulf and the international community in the United States. Yes, it needs innovativeness, it needs initiation, and it needs for Israel to put a plan on the table.
The last question for the minority leader will come from the minority leader.
Yeah.
It will not be a question, it will be a comment. Again, thanking Chaim and Cheryl and the Brookings Institute and all of you, and joining and welcoming all of our guests, all of the guests from Israel, and to you, Mr. Chairman. I just couldn't let one comment that I heard stand. While it is true that Israel and different parties in Israel have many friends in the United States whom we want to help them, with the presence of other members of Congress in the room, I cannot stand any notion that the United States government would be involved in an election in another country. We have fought that over and over again in the past, and we would fight it if they tried to be involved. Well, it just won't happen. But I know that, I don't know if that was a casual reference or if you're referring to private individuals assisting, but the United States government does not get involved in elections in other countries. That is our policy. Thank you.
And to Chaim, thank you.
I'm sorry, I'm kind of jumping the line for one more question, but it's something that's really on my mind, and I appreciate you giving me the opportunity. The vast majority of American juries, either reform or conservative, the vast majority. That majority feels at least pretty much rejected in Israel from a conversion standpoint and others. Are you taking the risk in Israel of losing American Jewry rather than including them, acknowledging the fact that Reform Jews can be very good Jews? They're not, people that need to be rejected, and they are. How would you deal with this? If you were, it's a theoretical question, and no, please answer that theoretical question. Don't give me the Hillary response,
Chaim,
please.
I'm telling you that I have huge respect for the reform and conservative movements, and they can tell you what a vast relationship of cooperation we have, my colleagues have. I have with me here member of the Knesset, Merav Michaeli from my party, a huge gender and women's issues leader. And yes, she deserves a clap as well. Anyway, but the issue is the following. There is a growing strength of those movements in Israel. Those movements have been advocating for years, telling their leaders, if you want to succeed in Israel, compete in the market. Go into the market. Stop kind of complaining and attacking all day long. Go in. Found communities, build communities, and you know what? They've done it. I was the first minister in Israel's history as Minister of Housing to grant construction of synagogues to the reform and conservative movements. None of you are aware of it, but this has gone on already for many years since then. And I can tell you more than that. They've taken a distinguished place in Israel. We've come to many arrangements. The new conversion bill is a change. Tzipi was heavily involved in it, and other her party member advocated it, actually a modern Orthodox guy. And there are many changes way beyond what you understand. It's not that the conservatives and reform are shunned out. The issue of marriage and divorce in Israel is under the rabbinic laws. That's an issue to debate. That's a big issue to debate. But that doesn't mean that there won't be change because the ultra-Orthodox are there. They've also changed. I won't go into many details, but I'll explain the following. Take the issue of the gay community, gay lesbian community in Israel. In many respects, despite the fact from the outside we are seen as a more conservative country, in this respect, Israel is one of the more advanced countries. It started with a lot of animosity from the ultra-Orthodox community, and today you won't hear a word. And therefore, all I'm trying to say is, without giving kind of awards to anybody or saying, I'm telling you that there are many processes which you're unaware of. And for me, the relationship with the conservative and reform movement are essential. And I believe in pluralism. But there's a way between believing and implementing. And part of it is the dialogue that we all hold with these movements in Israel and abroad.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. Appreciate it.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. And forum delegates, we will see you tomorrow morning. Our program begins at 9 o'clock. Thank you.